Hi, I'm Satyan Chari, and today I want to share with you my 3 top tips for taking resilience engineering to healthcare teams in the context of actual improvement work. Now, this is really pitched at those of you on the threshold of moving from theory into practice. I know the scenario where you're first trying to introduce RE concepts to clinical teams can be a source of much anxiety for many practitioners. And it's simply because they don't know where to start or how these ideas will be received. And well, I'm here to tell you that there are a couple of things you can do to make this a lot easier for yourself. And if you keep these tips in mind, you will increase your confidence and effectiveness in approaching these types of conversations. And I'm going to use the example of that dreaded first chat with a healthcare team where they've been asked to speak with you because either you're the designated improvement person or someone senior recommended you to them, but they already have a plan. So in their mind, this is going to be a short conversation. So you're in a room across the table from a bunch of slightly skeptical, time-pressured clinicians. What do you do? So here's my first step. You don't need to pitch because it's not a Shark Tank. Many practitioners feel they have to sell RE in their very first conversation about a clinical problem, almost as if they don't, that they'll lose that one best chance to influence the direction the work might take. Now, in my experience, this is a really low yield approach. It's very easy to come across as critical of the team's ideas or risk confusing them with a jumble of jargon that has really quite little meaning to them. And neither of those outcomes are desirable. And as an applied science, RE doesn't really lend itself to an elevator pitch. So avoid treating that first interaction like one. Instead, and here's my second tip, practice resilience-oriented sense-making. So now that you've been released from this burden of having to pitch to your colleagues, you can allow them some more latitude to explain the issues from their standpoint. And as they do, you can slowly introduce open-ended questions that shift the conversation to a different conceptualization of the problem. So, okay, how would that play out in practice? So say you've been asked to work with a clinical team which recently experienced an adverse event involving a really junior clinician who had to undertake this really complex treatment procedure. And the team's explaining to you how they're looking to implement a certain set of protocols to prevent that from happening again. But you're starting to suspect that this failure is really a signal of something deeper, a brittleness in the system. Now, my suggestion here would be to begin by gently probing the situation with a line of appreciative questions. So for instance, by asking them, how often does this procedure need to be performed? Who does this normally fall on? And why specifically them? And how do more experienced practitioners manage that particular risk compared to junior staff? How typical was the day that the event occurred? And what do teams normally do to ensure things go well when the situation is less than ideal? The benefits of taking this approach is that even though you aren't pitching anything, you're still asking legitimate questions that are already making the team start to think about systems and think about resilience. And if you do this well, you should find yourself in new territory really quickly. Which brings me to my third tip. Practice resilience-oriented reframing as often as possible. Conversations like this will give you natural opportunities to take an insight and put it back to the team in a new light. And I've always found that this is the kind of reframing that's really where you win people to a new way of approaching the problem. So for instance, I might say to the team, okay, so let me try to understand this. Junior clinicians carry a higher risk when performing this complex task. And while in the past you've had enough slack in the system to reorganize work so that experienced staff were able to take over, these days it feels like it's much harder to flex and adapt around those sorts of demands. Would that be fair? And if they think that it is, then I'll go, okay, well, so with that in mind, help me understand how the strategies you're thinking about would work the next time that situation arises. Now, chances are at this point, the team might start to sense, okay, there's some limitations of implementing a rule as a risk management strategy because the rule will likely be broken. And if they are, they might even be ready to start considering some measures that support resilience. And so you might say, well, okay, if we can't put more slack back into the system or ensure that clinicians are always going to be, senior clinicians will always be available when we need them, what can we do to reduce the actual risk to patients in those instances where less experienced staff have to attempt the procedure? And if we can't do that, can we do something different about how we anticipate these situations that allow us as a team to reorganize work more responsively? Or how could we resolve some of the goal conflicts that prevent staff from managing these types of situations better. It's in moments like that you're going to make RE concepts more real to the teams you're speaking with. And from that point on, you'll have many opportunities to explain more deeply and thoroughly why you think such a focus is productive. And you might even have clinicians wanting to learn more, and you could point them in the direction of some useful resources. This particular capacity for resilience-oriented reframing is something you need to work on. And while it will become natural over time, it's worth putting in the work. When I work with practitioners, I often get them to role play these types of conversations with others. Because it's one thing to have it all down in theory, but it's another thing taking it in an agile fashion into practice. Well, that's all I have for you, but give it a try. Let us know what you think. And if you've got some tips and strategies, why don't you share them with us? Thank you.